here is your host, Stormy Buonantony, on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome in to the Lombardi Line. This show, as always, presented by DraftKings, alongside Michael Lombardi, Stormy Buonantony with you. Got a great show on tap, and we are starting with a blockbuster. Sorry, Joel Embiid, you're going to have to wait after getting back on the court last night.
Yes, take a back seat, big boy. Yes.
Exactly. And because, unfortunately, Michael, since you're headed to vacation and Femi's in full-blown wedding mode, you guys have already recorded the GM Shuffle podcast, so we will include this in the feed this week, that the Buffalo Bills are finalizing a trade to send star wide receiver Stefon Diggs to the Houston Texans for draft compensation. Michael, Buffalo gets the Texans' 6th round pick this April, a 2025 second, that's the big one, and a 5th. What did you make of the news?
Well, a couple things here. Diggs, when he first got traded to Buffalo, he was coming off almost an 18-yard season per catch. This year he had 11.1, wasn't the same player. But I think the real question that has to get asked, Stormy, is how bad is the relationship between Diggs and his team for them to be willing to take a mediocre pick in 2026, which is a 2, and give back picks and a $31 million cap hit? Like, how bad can it be? And the answer is it had to be really bad, right? It had to be, in my book, Football Done Right, I break down trades. And when I break down these trades, there's a reason for a trade. We're one player away. We don't think the player's very good. But there's also the category, just get this guy out of the building. And this is a get this guy out of the building, because you don't eat $31 million. Tre'Davious White, they ate $19 million of cap room. But that was injury related, and I don't think Buffalo thinks that he could match that contract. Now, the Rams signed him for less, and maybe he can. But this is get the guy out of the building. We don't care what it costs. Russell Wilson, get him out of the building. We don't care what it costs. I mean, these are two of the most significant contracts that were just done 2 years ago that are out there in the open market. Yeah. I mean, think about that. Like, where is anybody's long-range thinking? Like, Denver had no reason to reduce Russell Wilson's contract, nor did Buffalo have any reason to reduce Stefon Diggs' contract, other than to try to make him happy. And what happens? You can't make him happy.
Yeah, Michael, I think you've said it numerous times on the show before. The worst trade you can do is the get him out of the building trade. And that's exactly what's happening with Stefon Diggs. So as you look at the Buffalo Bills big picture right now, where they offload all of these guys, including Tre'Davious White among those, in their efforts to get under the salary cap. Now they add another massive dead cap move, which, by the way, is the highest known dead money charge ever for a wide receiver in any season, according to ESPN stats and information. What do you think of the Buffalo Bills moving forward as it pertains to their Super Bowl window? And you mentioned it before we started off this hour. Sean McDermott specifically is the head coach of this team. How much pressure is he under?
Well, I mean, clearly they made a strategical decision. They want to be a 12 personnel team. When they drafted Kincaid last year in the bottom of the first, they got themselves, for lack of a better term, a big slot receiver, right? They want to be a 12 team because, let's face it, they play in Buffalo. They play in Lake Erie. The weather's not conducive. You've got to have physicality. You've got to run the ball. It's great to be an 11 team, but if you can't run the ball like Kansas City showed that they could do after Christmas, you're going to have some trouble. I don't care about all the analytical numbers saying you have to throw. I get it. I want to throw to score too, but you got to have some toughness with your team. And for me, when they drafted Kincaid, they were saying we're going to be a 12 team. And now they're saying, okay, we can replace, and I know no fan will agree with this, but what they're going to say to you is Mac Hollins, as a vertical outside receiver, can do all the things that Gabe Davis did at 1/10 of the cost, which I would agree with. Mac Hollins, if you watch him 2 years ago playing for the Raiders, made a ton of plays as the vertical outside receiver. Now, he's not throwing the ball in 3rd and 7. He's not going to draw coverage. But if you leave him alone out there one-on-one, this guy can beat somebody down the field and win. That replaces Davis. Now, they signed Curtis Samuel to replace what they were getting out of Diggs, which was 11 yards a catch at 1/3 of the cost. So for me, I'm like, and now they have the draft. And so I think what they're saying is it's not all going to be bad. It's not going to be bad. Now, they've lost a lot of guys. They've lost 15 players off their team, mostly on defense. That's where I'm mostly concerned with their team.
now, because of this, you wonder on the draft side of this at 28, if now they go wide receiver. Elliot and I were talking before the show. There's the issue now with the Chiefs potentially and Rashee Rice. Like maybe now some players and teams, rather, that we didn't expect to maybe go for a wide receiver in the first round are now in that position of need. The wide receiver over under total for the first round is 6.5. That went from plus 170 to plus 125, still a plus money price. But it looks like the Bills are going to need to get a wide receiver at number 28. It's a great wide receiver class, but who's going to be available at that point?
Well, let's just look at this for a second before panicking. Tank Dell was drafted in the 3rd round, and I don't think there was a receiver that made more of an impact on their team when he played, right? I thought he was sensational. Now, he got hurt at the end of the year. But Nico Collins is one of their best receivers on Houston. Yep. He was picked in the 3rd round. Right? We see the Green Bay receivers are having unbelievable seasons, and they weren't picked. So I don't think there's a sense of, if we don't get one at 28, we're not going to get one. I think they're out there. You just have to find them.
In terms of the odds, there was a little bit of movement for the Bills side of things. They go from 11-1 to 12-1 to win the Super Bowl. AFC East plus 115 to plus 160, and their win total, while it remains at 10, the under was a plus money price at plus 120. Now it's minus 120. And on the Houston front, their odds to make the playoffs get juiced even higher from minus 140. Those expectations even bigger to minus 190. That 9.5 win total from minus 110 to minus 140. And the Super Bowl odds cut down from 25-1 to 17-1. Odds with teams that have been considered contenders the last couple years in the Cowboys and Philadelphia Eagles. So significant moves improving the odds on Houston and dumbing them down for Buffalo. So this is a move that moves the needle, whereas a lot of them often don't.
Well, here's what I will say. Mixon wasn't the same player for Cincinnati. Diggs wasn't the same player for Buffalo. Like, before we go and give them the Super Bowl trophy, let's make sure they signed 3. Danielle Hunter was great last year, but he's had moments where he's had back injuries. Like, yes, they've done a lot of good things in Houston, and I think they clearly have put their money on the middle of the table and gone all in. Now they haven't talked to Robert Saleh yet to decide if they can, because he controls the AFC. But the reality of it is they're taking some risk here, too, taking on $18.5 million of his contract. He's been a problem. I mean, again, if you're willing to take on $31 million of a cap hit for a guy you just redid his contract, things must have gone really bad. And he hasn't played as well in 2 years, right? I know he had averaged 11 yards a catch last year. That's not great for as many times he got the ball. Now, they lost 92 first downs between Gabe Davis and Stefon Diggs. They got to replace those 92 first downs. That's going to be the challenge. Can they? We'll see. I'm more concerned about their defense. Houston, 12 new faces on defense, Stormy. They've really done a nice job of repairing the defense. They've got faster at linebacker. They got 2 better defensive players in Hunter and Autry inside. So I think they've done more defensively, although the offense will get all the attention. But defensively, I think it's where they've improved their team.
Is there anything to the fact that this is a team that had little to no expectations with a rookie quarterback? Then he goes out and has the best historical season for a rookie quarterback in NFL history, Offensive Player of the Year. Now you add in all of this talent to it. The expectations for this team are completely different than what they were a year ago. Is there anything to that type of pressure for this team moving forward in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, no question, right? You've gone from being the hunter to the hunted, and that's always challenging. And for a young team, you've got to stay motivated, which is probably why I think Nick Caserio went with older guys, Hunter and Diggs, if he can be any kind of leader, Dalton Schultz, guys who have been there before, Shaq Mason, the starting right guard. Give you a sense of, hey, guys, we haven't won anything yet. We still have to be able to carry out the game plan. And with D'Amico Ryans and having Jimmy Ward in his secondary kind of as the leadership group, I think they'll be fine in that area. But they will be the hunted.
Yeah.
And people will know that on the schedule, they're going to be a tough out. Like, they're not going to be an easy team to play because they are very talented and they run a really good scheme. And so, now the schedule hasn't come out yet, but, whenever you look at it, the AFC South, they play the AFC East Interconference and they play the NFC North. Okay. And then the 17th game is against an NFC East opponent, which would be for the Texans would be against Dallas. Because that you play the NFC East opponent, which is whatever you fit. So for me, the schedule sets up for them too, because the North is going to be good, but they can compete there. And I don't think the AFC East is going to be anywhere near as good as it was last year.
And Michael, obviously it was a tumultuous ending with Stefon Diggs and the Bills. The last year and a half has not been well. We've questioned the relationship from the outside looking in with him and Josh Allen. And this trade, of course, comes a day after Diggs responded to a social media user's declaration that he was not essential to the Bills quarterback Josh Allen's success, replying, "You sure?" when somebody implied as much online. With some of the off-field or like connectivity issues that we've seen with Diggs in the past, when he is now in a new situation, you anticipate those to go to the wayside and he gets back to his happy-go-lucky wide receiver oneself?
I think that you just hit the million-dollar question, Stormy, right? Is how's he going to be from being the man to being the guy who's going to fit in? Right? Because he's not drawing the coverage. I mean, when you watched him, Nico Collins and Tank Dell, and Dalton Schultz, right? Those were the guys that you sit there and said, okay, and then within this scheme, you know, with the Slovic scheme, you want to get the ball in the middle of the field, and the tight end's a vital part of that. The inside receivers are really important. So the pressure's off Diggs, really. It's off him. He's got the contract. It's off him. So how he behaves is really going to be, do you want to win or you don't want to win? Because you got paid. You know, you got paid, and we got enough players to win with you or without you. So they're going to have to manage that completely.
Stefon Diggs led the NFL in receptions during his 4 seasons with the Bills. With all the talk about Brandon Ayuk and the 49ers too, what does this do for his potential trade value? How do you see that playing out?
Well, I think he's in a separate category. Keenan Allen went for a 4th, right? Amari Cooper went for a 5th. You know, those were cap casualties more than anything. And this is a cap casualty as much as anybody, whereas Ayuk isn't a cap casualty. So he's in a different category. I think his value is going to be way above all these guys. And I think the 49ers are sitting there saying, like they did with when they traded away Buckner, could we replace him for a cheaper guy in the first round? Now, it didn't work out. They took Kinlaw, and that didn't work out for him. They lost Buckner. Buckner was great, has been great for the Colts, but Kinlaw did nothing for them. So I think that's that'll be how they operate. I truly believe they'll want to sign Ayuk. It's going to come down to what does he want contractually, right? Is this going to be a $31 million? Is he going to go to the Jefferson over? The threshold's getting over 30, right?
Yep.
You can't pay Ayuk over 30. He's had that one great season of last year where he averaged almost 18 yards a catch. That would be hard for me to see him as over 30.
It rarely, if ever, works out, I feel like, when guys get paid after one really good season.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle here with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos here as we start this evergreen podcast. But NFL draft news is at the top of mind this time of year. We all understand that the number 1 overall pick is going to be Caleb Williams to the Chicago Bears. That's minus 4,000 at our show sponsor, DraftKings Sportsbook. However, the number 2 pick seems like there's a little bit of uncertainty, although there is a guy in Jaden Daniels who's emerged as maybe the consensus choice, but the betting market still has him at minus 160 to be the 2nd overall pick here. This top of the draft, I think, is rather interesting because the Commanders are going to take a quarterback, but after that, I don't think I'm confident saying anything. Like New England, we've projected QB to the Patriots, but are we certain that they're going to take a quarterback? Like, how do you read the top of the draft here, Michael, as we're about 3.5 weeks out?
I think to me, you have to, this is what happens. We get a lot of data comes in and everybody starts talking. They're going to do this. I hear they're going to do that. I hear they're going to do this. You have to look at their team. Like New England signed 1 quarterback. I know they got Bailey Zappi on the team, but they can't put Bailey Zappi in the game, right? So they've signed 1 quarterback for a 1-year deal, Jacoby Brissett. And, so how are they not taking a quarterback? Now, maybe they'll take one. You think they're going to take one at the top of the 2nd? I mean, if you're thinking about a quarterback in the top of the 2nd, then, that guy's usually in the conversation in the 1st round, right? Mm-hmm. And, I think it's hard to predict that. So for me, I think it would be really hard for me to understand New England not taking a quarterback, not taking one. So, I think when you look at the top of the draft, it's figuring out what Washington's going to do. They're going to take a quarterback too. We saw that they just signed Mariota for a deal, which can't last them very long. They trade Howell. They give Howell away, which I think was not smart on their part. They had 2 more years on a contract, but I guess he was from the past era, and they want to get rid of all those guys, all those people. So, and now the question is, where does McCarthy go, right? McCarthy drew a lot of attention. The Giants were there at his workout. They took him out to dinner. They spent time with him. Are they going to take a quarterback where they're picking? I'm not sure they are. I think John Mara's probably going to let them all kind of do their homework and make them grade them. And then the grades are going to dictate based on the Giants system that, we can't take McCarthy in the first round. He's not going to have a high enough grade. Or we can't take Bo Nix in the first round. He doesn't have a high enough grade. We got to take something else. So I think that's kind of what's going on. I think the Chargers would be open for business. Arizona's open for business. I think there's a lot of maneuvering around, especially in light of the way Neighbors worked out, right? Yeah. I mean, if you were to say to Monty Ossendorf, would you rather have Neighbors or Harrison? The answer to the question is I'd rather have Neighbors and more draft picks than Harrison and not a draft pick. See, that's the question, right? Because if I trade down, can I still get Neighbors and draft picks? Or would I rather have Alt and draft picks than taking Alt at 4?
Yeah, or maybe even
you have to fill in the blanks. You have to. I don't think they're going to do that. You have to fill in the blanks. You have to fill in the blanks of what you want to do. Maybe they'll take Dallas Turner at 4. See, I know everybody says take these receivers in the top 5. I get that. I mean, God forbid if you don't have a receiver on the team. But as the great Jim Harbaugh said, who's living like Jim Rockford, the only position that is independent of needing someone else is the line. And if you're not good, the Giants should take a tackle because Evan Neal's not a good player. They should take a tackle, but they're not going to admit that he's not a good player because they drafted him. So they're going to be in confirmation bias. Again, go back to Kahneman's book. There's everything you need to know about the NFL draft in Kahneman's book.
It's interesting, the wide receiver thing. Like I saw a tweet, it was about 6 weeks ago or so, that said that there was potentially 8 wide receiver ones in this NFL draft, but at the same time, we also need to take Harrison and Neighbors in the top 5. Like, if there's so many good ones, why can't we wait for the second round or later on in the draft to take one of those guys? You don't have to take it early. Maybe you take one of those linemen, be a pass protector or a pass rusher there. But I know some of these teams are going to want to get those wide receivers because, hey, Neighbors, he worked out awesome at the LSU workout. Jumped out of the gym. He ran a really good time. Harrison, he stood on his film, didn't do any of the workouts, but everybody is really into Marvin Harrison Jr. and what he's able to do and what he did at Ohio State. So those guys are going to probably go early. But the reason why I asked you about the New England Patriots at number 3 and why I'm not super confident, if you told me, hey, what are they going to do? I would say take a quarterback, but I'm not 100% confident that they would do that because what if they don't like the guys who are still there? Like what if they had their eyes set on Jaden Daniels or if they had their eyes set on Drake May and the Commanders took that guy and then they said, all right, well, if we're not in love with so-and-so, we don't want to just take any quarterback. We need to take a quarterback. We don't want to just take any guy. Could they potentially move down? Because, they're going to say whatever they're going to say. It's saying, hey, we're open for business and all that stuff. But if they don't like the guy, maybe somebody else, maybe Minnesota wants to move up to 3. I think those options could be on the table, couldn't they?
Oh, I definitely think they could be on the table. It's what's the price. And I think Minnesota would be interested in doing something to move up. I think Minnesota is committed to trying to find their guy, and they're committed to using the resources to the guy. But you got to be right with it. You got to be right. You got to be completely right with your evaluation. And that's the hard part. And you have to ask yourself the question, what are we going to do when we draft him? You can watch Jaden Daniels, and he's good. He's better in the pocket. He's inconsistent with his accuracy. We saw that in his workout, right? His accuracy at times, he's very quick. He's athletic. I don't think he anticipates as well. He can eventually improve in that area. But there's enough to like that you can build a team around him and feel like if you take May at 2 or 3, what you're saying is we're going to get him to 0-2 level. We're going to improve everything that he does. He's going to become more. There's a lot of things that you're saying to yourself. Again, it goes back to the fool's gold. It's 1849. We're going to tell you, we're going to turn this little dust into gold. How do you plan to do that? How do we plan to do that? And that's really what doesn't get answered all the time as the plan. How are we going to do that? And we're just going to keep talking about these quarterbacks all the way through when you and I both know that every one of them is going to have something wrong with them. If you don't need any more evidence than this, when Penix didn't have the board, when Daniels didn't have the LSU offense, they were not the same players. So there's data within that. You could say injuries, Bo Nix at Oregon, you could say Gussie, but you got to figure that out. And then you got to figure out what the colleges where they went to, how they coached them, what they did. Because none of these guys are just plug and play, including Caleb Williams, including him. There's a lot to like about Williams, but there's also a lot not to like about Williams. I mean, you got to spend a lot of time in Oklahoma on Williams, more than you spend at USC. I mean, USC was not a tough team. It's not a demanding. You don't know how he's going to respond to some of the things. Do I think he's talented? There's no question. Do I think he's generational? No, I don't.
Yeah, no, there's no perfect prospect, I guess, is like the real takeaway here. And there's no like, hey, this guy's going to 100%.
Is.
Yeah, there never is. Yeah. Everybody.
That's why Montana goes to the 49ers in the third round, and they use his strengths. And Montana's incredibly talented. Go back to his high school, all-state basketball, football, did everything he could do. He was talented. To say he wasn't, but the reason he was a third-round pick is people couldn't identify the talent into the system. And Walsh was able to do that. It's the same thing with Purdy. Purdy was, good in college. People were worried about his size, and could his development go into pro? It's the projection that has to occur.
That's why it's the inexact science, because you can't just draft them and set it and forget it. You got to also develop it within the system and develop those skills. What is it? Walsh says in the second year we want to develop the players. Or the first year we want to develop the players' skills in the system, and then we can kind of go from there. And that's what these teams have to do with these quarterbacks. Ultimately,
the first year we learn about the player's skills, and the second year we develop his skills within the system.
Boom, there it is. I screwed that up, but nice recovery there. Ultimately,
it's okay.
In the top,
you're going on your honeymoon. You got a lot of things on your mind. Do you have the seating chart for the wedding done?
We have it. We did it a couple of weeks ago. It was an interesting time.
I bet that didn't go good.
It went better than I thought. It actually went better than I thought it would have gone. Because like my brother, because he got married about 4 years, 2019, so 5 years ago now. Geez. And he said that it was contentious, but luckily we did not have those issues. So it was pretty calm. But with these quarterbacks at the top of the draft, how many of them, if you had to take a guess right now, let's say the top 6 picks, because that's where the Giants cut off at, how many quarterbacks do you think we see in those top 6?
I lean 3.
1, 2, 3, or is it like 1, 2, something else? Do you think it's gonna be 1, 2, 3?
It never goes 1, 2, 3. I mean, the question I think you have to ask if you're going to take May is what's the difference between May and Anthony Richardson? Now, obviously, Richardson was faster, probably more athletic, but you had to project an upside to Richardson. You had to project that you're going to develop accuracy, timing, rhythm, all those things. There's less of a projection with May in some of those areas, but they're similar questions. They're not similar players. They're just similar questions. And so, we saw those guys come off the board like that. It's like I said on our show the other day. Look, don't tell me Michael Penix isn't worthy of a first-round pick when Will Levis went in the first round. Well, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying.
Well, Levis was early second round, but he was close to being a first-round pick, though. He was, and people talked about him as if he was going to go.
Of course they did, Adam. This time last year, he was 4-1 to go first pick overall.
That's very true. We all remember the Reddit post where somebody said Levis told them he was going to go first overall to the Carolina Panthers. On draft night, we were doing the show together last year. Levis, I think, was like minus 200 to be the Colts pick at 4 or something like that, like right before the pick was even turned in. And then he goes all the way outside, ends up being like the first or second pick of day 2 on Friday. It's obviously lying season is in full swing right now here as we're 3 weeks out from the NFL draft. But yeah, sometimes if you compare guys from past classes, we all watched college football this past season. Michael Penix was one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Levis, a couple years ago, was not at Kentucky. Like, I think anybody with eyeballs would go ahead and agree with that one. But some of these guys are going to get propped up and some are not. I think Bo Nix is also really interesting. You mentioned the Denver Broncos for Bo Nix, that he could be kind of a Sean Payton type quarterback. I've now heard other people piggybacking that sort of sentiment there, to where there's kind of tying Nix to the Broncos. We'll see. I mean, it could be Knicks to the Broncos on day 2. Maybe it's day 1. But I think these guys at the top of the draft are going to be really, really interesting. We're going to start to find out where they might be going. Brian Kelly seems to think the Commanders are taking Jaden Daniels based on what he said at the Pro Day. We'll see if that ends up being the case. And ultimately,
I think we should talk about that when we come back from the break.
Let's do it.
I want to hit that when we come back from the break.
Let's talk about that. We'll also talk about some early thoughts on NFL win totals. You can bet them now at DraftKings. We'll discuss it next here on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
So as we were heading to break, I mentioned how LSU head coach Brian Kelly, when he was talking with the media at the LSU Pro Day, paraphrasing here a little bit, but almost kind of said that he expects the Commanders to take Jaden Daniels. And you had an interesting kind of, I guess, takeaway from that. What did you take away from what Kelly had to say and how we should be interpreting that as we're a few weeks away from the NFL draft?
Look, nobody told Brian Kelly they're going to take him. Brian Kelly's done this a lot, right? He's been asked questions about a lot of his players over a long period of time. And I think what Brian is being brutally honest based on the questions that are being asked to him, that he's making a deductive reasoning based on those questions, right? And I think that's fair. They're asking him serious questions about the player. And Brian can surmise from those questions what they're thinking of, because his answers are either going to support what they want to know or not support. And clearly Brian's going to support Jaden Daniels. Mm-hmm. So I think what we're doing is it's deductive reasoning. But I think it's unfair to Washington, and it's unfair to Kelly to say he's making that prediction based on someone told him something. No, there's no leaks now. I mean, here's what I think people have to understand about the way decisions are made at this level in terms of guarding secrets, right? And so we know there's always somebody who can't wait to tell somebody something, right? And so it's like one person tells one, and the next thing you know. So what you have to do is like, let's say you are Washington. So everybody's in the room after the workouts giving their opinion on what they saw with Jaden Daniels. They write it up, they grade him. Everybody listens and digests that, okay? And then when the room clears out and there's Josh Harris, Dan Quinn, and Adam Peters, and maybe one other person, maybe Martin Mayhew, maybe someone else, Marty Herney, I don't know who else, okay? They're in there. And those four sit down and say, okay, what do we think? Because you want to be able to understand where the leak's coming from. And so no one's going to show their cards when you're in a group meeting. They're going to be close to the vest. Al Davis would never show his card. You could tell where he was going, but he would always try to be overtly the other way to kind of hide what he wanted to do. But until the group gets really small, no one's going to decide on what they're going to do. And they're going to keep saying, okay, well, we need to find out about this guy and we need to find out about this. Let's spend a little bit more time in this area. Okay, we got the 2 pick. We know we're on the clock because they know we're going to take Caleb Williams. Here we are. And then eventually it's almost like no one said, we're going to do this in Dallas on November 22nd. It was all just kind of rhymed together. Right? Because once somebody says it, you got to go back and there's the person, right?
Yeah.
So that's the same thing when it comes to being secrets. Nobody really says this is what we're doing until the day of. But Kelly got an indication from the questions, and eventually Washington will have an indication, but only 3 or 4 people are going to know about it. So all this speculation, well, here's what I hear about Washington. It's on a lower level. And it's as good a chance to be misinformation as it does to be correct information.
Yeah, no, I think it's really fascinating to just hear where this stuff comes from, because like you said, it could be on a lower, it could be a scout that's saying, hey, I think we kind of like Jaden Daniels, and it tells it to an insider, and it's, hey, Washington leaning towards, or I think we kind of like J.J. McCarthy. Then, because there's been reports of McCarthy and the Commanders liking him. It's just, you don't know where this stuff is. It's probably not coming from Adam Peters. I guess I would guess that from Jump Street. I don't think it's coming from him. He comes from the Niners. The Niners are usually pretty kind of locked down in what they leak out to the information. I mean, everybody thought that they were taking Mac Jones until the morning of the draft, and they ended up taking Trey Lance back in 2021. But I also do think that it happens to be an organization by organization case, though, as well, because, I mean, in 2021, we all knew that the New York Jets were taking Zach Wilson. Like why did they leak that out, or why did that get out in that organization to where it's like, hey, Lawrence is going 1, Wilson's going 2, the draft starts at 3. Like that to me was almost a little bit strange.
Well, I think they wanted to support their pick because I think sometimes you leak it out there to build momentum to let them know so you don't catch them blindsided, right? If you catch them blindsided, you're going to get ripped for the pick. Well, you could have got that guy earlier, or you could have got that guy here, or why'd you take that guy at this point? When you prepare it, it's almost like you're doing a PR campaign before it happens. It's almost a black op operation. You got to put the story on the ground before you get in there. And you want to sell the pick. And the Jets clearly wanted to sell the pick and probably felt like they didn't have anybody else that would have, they wanted to not be, everybody thought it was going to be Justin Fields. But there was a time up until, I would say 2 or 3 days before the draft where it was supposed to be Fields, right?
Yeah.
So, and then it moved off, or was it Fields? Am I in the right draft here?
No. Well, I think
it was Fields, right?
Yeah, early on in the process, people thought it was going to be Lawrence, Fields 1, 2, because those were the top 2 recruited guys out of high school and all that. But then Wilson sort of emerged as the guy.
Yeah, and then, but that sells their pick, right? It gives them the confidence that they have their pick, and they go from there. So I think, to me, it's about selling your pick. It's about giving your pick some substance to it.
Yeah. Do you think that the Commanders know right now who they would like whoever the decision maker is, whether it's Peters or do you think that they know who they're taking at number 2 right now?
Yeah, I think they do. I think they do. I think they both know. I think there's probably more medical that has to get drawn through it, but I think they probably have an idea where they're headed. They haven't said there's nobody saying this is what we're doing, but they have an idea.
They've kind of just got to check off a couple boxes or dot some I's, cross some T's, and then ultimately come to the decision. Yeah, but when teams know, is it usually after pro days? I guess you said they got to wait for the medical stuff and all that, and I'm sure they'll maybe do a couple visits, but it feels like pro days is usually kind of like the linchpin, like the milestone mark in the timeline of, okay, after that, then everybody kind of figures out this is what it's going to be.
Well, I think a lot of it is what questions do you have on the guy? Do you have a question about his medical, like Michael Penix? Like, what's the question on Penix? Like, I suspect based on Penix's workout, and if his medical comes back, I think you'll start hearing his name move up the ladder a little bit. But right now, there's not that grade in there, so you just don't know. Whereas I think if they're clean, where are they going to go? I think, and usually we are in the 1st of April. I would say in the next 10 days. This is the week where players go back for recheck physicals. And then this group of people that are actually putting the boards are all together. So the scouts all know where they have their guys in graded. But now this is where the board gets kind of moved around in a clandestine fashion so that nobody really knows. I think Washington knows kind of where they're headed. I think they have pretty good conviction. Well, they'll say, hey, this has been our guy all along. I think they have a pretty good understanding of that. They should.
Yeah, well, they only got about 3 weeks to figure it out. So they're currently on the clock since Caleb Williams likely to go to the Chicago Bears. It would be a stunner if he did not. We got 4.5 minutes left here. Wanted to get some early thoughts on these NFL win totals. All 32 teams posted over on the DraftKings Sportsbook here, Michael. Any of these jump out to you? You can go in either direction, AFC, NFC, whichever division you want. What's the one that really jumped out to you when you took a look at all 32 of these win totals?
I thought the Cowboys over 10.5 was way too much. I'm of the belief the Cowboys are not I'm not believe the Cowboys underachieved. I thought they overachieved. I think the schedule will be harder. I think their depth's going to be challenged. I thought that was a little bit out of a little bit too high for them based on what I've seen. I think the Steelers at 8.5, they won 10 last year. They're going to be better this year. Like you're saying that they're going to take a decline. I don't know about that. The Ravens at 11.5 are the interesting one because the Ravens have gotten gorged in free agency tremendously. But what they have is they have a lot of young players behind the players they've lost, which is what a good team should do, right? You lose a player, you have a young guy behind them, and you're operating on an economic value salary structure. But we don't know if those players are going to manifest themselves into proven starters, right? So they lose Simpson, they lose Morgan Moses. They had to redo Ronnie Stanley's deal, right? So they've lost a lot of players. Clowney is a rusher, but they have guys behind them. So we'll see. Those are the ones that kind of jumped out to me And then I think there is some, always you're thinking there's got to be some improvement, right? Like, let's take New England. New England's at 4.5. Like, New England should have won 7 games. If they had a damn field goal kicker and a quarterback who wouldn't just have brain farts, they're going to win 7 games last year. Like, they're not that bad of a team.
Yeah.
Right? They're not that bad of a team. So 4.5, they beat the Jets last year with a bad team. And the almighty Jets. Now, they didn't have him. So I think, to me, that's one of those where you have to say 4.5. You're really saying they don't have a very good team. Yeah. Whereas, like Carolina, 4.5. Do you think they can get to 5? Can Bryce Young play better? You would think so. Are they going to be better on defense? You would think so. I mean, that there's a chance for improvement there, like the Cardinals improved last year.
Yeah, New England and Carolina have the lowest win total at 4.5. 2 that really jumped out to me, both of them overs. Vikings at 6.5. That feels a little low to me, given the quality of that coaching staff and the pieces around him. I get that Sam Darnold right now was the projected quarterback, but it sounds like they're going to go ahead and get a quarterback in this draft. I think that's just a touch low on Minnesota. I think they're a little bit better than the market thinks. And then another one, which I'm surprised, and I get why they put it here just because of the receivers and the guys that they've lost, but the Chargers at 8.5. This was a team that was 9.5 last year with Brandon Staley at head coach. Now you bring in Jim Harbaugh. That's a pretty big upgrade in my estimation. Harbaugh and Justin Herbert, and the win total is at 8.5. And yeah, they got to replace Keenan Allen. They got to replace Mike Williams is always hurt. He was hurt all of last year pretty much with the ACL. So you just have to replace Keenan Allen, who, as you've said, is not scaring anybody when they're driving to the stadium. I think that 8.5 is a little low for the combination of Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert. Even though it's year 1 and they got to kind of transition this thing over, I think they're picking high enough. They got enough resources. They'll be a little bit tougher. I think over 8.5 is pretty interesting for the Los Angeles Chargers.
I kind of feel the same way about Seattle. Not as it relates to, well, they're going to be much better without Pete Carroll, because I don't believe that. But 7.5. I think they're going to regain a home field advantage. I think Mike McDonald's going to prove to be a better defensive coordinator for the Seahawks than what they had last year, right? And Clint Hurdle, I think that's so I think that's going to be an improvement, right? And so I think that they're still a good team. Last year they played a lot without their starting tackles. They can run the football. They have skill. Like, I think they're going to be better than 7.5. I really do.
Yeah. Real quick housekeeping note before we wrap things up. No podcast on Monday. It'll be a GM Shuffle spring break. Michael's in the Bahamas. I will be in St. Lucia on my honeymoon after getting married, I should say. So we will be back on Thursday. It'll be Ben Wilson here at VSiN filling in for me, and I'll be back with you guys on April 18th, post-honeymoon, and ready to go for the NFL draft. But for our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos, everybody behind the glass, we'll say so long. Michael, take it easy. Have fun on vacation, man.